this Bible study of the Banking Blessings Ministry. My name is Goodluck Ofebu, and this is my wife,
Ofebu.
We welcome you to our continuing study on husband-wife interactions. Today we are going to start a mini-series on Abraham and Sarah. We're going to look at the interactions between Abraham and his wife Sarah, or between Abraham and God, between God and Sarah. And we're going to try to look at this and learn. After all, these were, I would say, the primary couple. After Adam and Eve, of course, were the first couple, but after so many generations, these are the couple that started Christianity, through which God introduced sowed the seeds of Christianity. And through their relationship, often a lot of what we're going to look at is really about interactions between God and Abraham. But connected in this are also interactions between Abraham and Sarah that will help us understand how God may have seen their relationship. The interactions actually tell us something about how he saw the relationship of Abraham and Sarah, which of course suggests something to us about how he sees the relationship between husband and wife. We learned in the case of Adam and Eve that God considered marriage as bringing a man and woman together into one, to become one. And we see a practice of that in the interactions between Abraham and Sarah. But let me not go too far. Let me give my wife a chance to say some opening words, and then we get into the study.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome all our viewers and partners and those that connect to us via Facebook, our website. The interaction between Abraham and Sarah is always a very interesting one. There are things we would see that in modern day times we will say, oh, if that happened to me, I would never take it as a spouse, or maybe as a wife. And there are things, and we see how God used them together, and we'll see how, the Bible tells us how their relationship, as husband and wife, was. So I'm looking forward to learning some new things as the Holy Spirit will reveal to us through this Bible study.
Yes. Well, as I said, we're going to actually see that there are two clear lessons. Of course, the interactions between Abraham and Sarah span over a very long time and over several events, so we could not really cover all these in one Bible study. And in order to give us time to look at it carefully, we have divided the study into 4 sessions, and today we're going to look at the first session. And what we're going to learn through these 4 sessions is that there are basically 2 lessons coming out of Abraham-Sarah interactions, and that is that God considered Abraham leader and representative of the family. There is no doubt about that, and we're going to see several things that happened. But we see something else that it's not mentioned clearly, but it comes out of the interactions, that God considered Abraham and Sarah as one. And what this means we're going to see, because in most cases, when he was talking to Abraham, when he was making a promise to Abraham and Sarah, he actually spoke the promise to Abraham as if he was speaking to the two of them. And what we understand from that is that he saw them as the same, so that there isn't a separation. Well, let me not jump ahead. There are a lot of these we have to go through carefully to see what happened that conveys this understanding. But two lessons we're going to learn: that yes, God considered Abraham leader and representative of the family, but he also considered Abraham and Sarah to be one in God, so that whatever happens with one happens with the other. Or well, we'll see it as we go. Our study will come from Genesis 12, Genesis chapter 12 through chapter 23. As I said, there are 4 sessions, so we'll make selections that are relevant to what we focus in each session of the study. That God, looking at Abraham as leader of the family and looking at him as representing not just himself, but also himself and his wife. In that role as leader of the family, he gave him directions. He gave directions to Abraham. He made promise to him on behalf of the family. You could see that the promise that he made to Abraham really couldn't be just for Abraham as an individual. It was really a promise to a couple, or to two people that are considered to be one, because each of the promises concerns a family and concerns generations of people that will descend from that family. God received commitments from Abraham on behalf of his family. And what we see in all of this is that he communicated with Abraham, but every communication he had with Abraham applied equally to Sarah. And this is not just saying, we will see that each of the things that he discussed with Abraham was really about Abraham's family. It wasn't about Abraham as an individual. Still trying to, in the first lesson, the first 2 parts, 2 slides sort of talked about what we're going to see in the overall session. In the 4 sessions. But in the first session, we're going to focus on the call of Abraham. When God called Abraham to a mission and spoke promises to him. And we are going to see that Abraham's wife Sarah was considered a co-beneficiary and an equal beneficiary of God's promise to Abraham. In fact, Abraham by himself, the promise could not have been fulfilled to one person. He required a couple, he required a family. So the promise that God made to Abraham were promises to Abraham's family. And we are going to see that Sarah was party with Abraham in every interaction with God, even when she was not physically involved. And she was not physically involved in many of them. But the language of the promise, the content of the promise, the content of the interaction in each case, was directed at a family led by Abraham. At that time, of course, Abraham didn't have a child, didn't have any child. Sarah didn't have any child. So it was directed at 2 of them as the foundation of a family that God was essentially launching through the interaction with Abraham. Honey, I know I'm just starting, but if you want to jump in, okay. So let us start with the call of Abraham. And we're just going to go through the call as the way it happened, the way it is reported in the Bible, and then we try to understand what it really meant. God called Abraham, and in this call, he addressed Abraham. What we mean by call is that he presented a mission to Abraham. He said, okay, come out of where you are living, leave your family, your parents, your people, and move to a different place, to a land I will show you. And you are going to, of course, he didn't tell him everything here, but he said, look, you are going to be blessed, and the whole world is going to be blessed, the whole human race is going to be blessed through you. We'll read the details in the Bible, but it was a promise that was presented to Abraham as if to him as an individual. But we will find that this promise was directed to him and his wife Sarai. We'll find also in the reading that Abraham was he was 75 years old at the time God had this interaction with him, and his wife Sarai was 65 years, that's 10 years younger than Abraham. We're going to have the information is contained in two parts of the Bible, but we're going to read only the promise in Genesis chapter 12 verses 1 through 5. But we note that in Genesis chapter 20 verses 11 and 13 help us understand the history of Abraham and Sarah relationship. That Sarah was in fact a half-sister to Abraham. It was a daughter of Abraham's father through another woman. And they've known each other virtually all their life. The Bible doesn't tell us when they got married, but at the time of this interaction, Abraham was already 75 and Sarah 65. Yeah, if we imagine they married somewhere between 30 and 40 years or anything, then they must have been together at least 20 years before. If Abraham was 30 when they married, I'm talking about 45. They must have been together about, let's just guess, at least 30 years before this incident occurred. So they were married for at least 30 years. They still don't have a child. So a lot of things, we'll discuss this as we go along. There are a lot of things that could have happened differently, simply simply for the fact that they've been married for so long and yet didn't have a child. But what we will find, not in today's lesson, that will come in another session, was that Abraham himself considered himself so tied to Sarah, and his relationship, in fact, the two of them, their relationship together was more important to them than anything else. They were willing to give up anything in order to stay together as husband and wife. Well, let us read about the promise or the call of Abraham from Genesis 12 verses 1 to 5.
Genesis chapter 12, reading from the New King James Version, verse 1. The Lord had said to Abraham, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there.
Well, this went too far. Did I miss something there? Okay, I did it. So when they arrived in Canaan, God appeared to Abraham at Shechem. Immediately after they arrived, we are going to read about this. I'm just going through some things that happened. And then he spoke to Abraham again after Lot moved out, because Abraham came out with Lot. They stayed together for some time, and then at some point they decided to separate. So at the arrival, God spoke to Abraham, and then when Lot moved out, God spoke to Abraham. And in each of these cases, what God discussed with Abraham was really about a family matter. If you think about it in these days, if it is something happening between human beings and something this fundamental, a big promise or a big land transaction or something, most people will say, oh, bring your wife, let's discuss this together. But God didn't say that, and we're going to look at the implications of this. I see two implications there, and we'll look at them carefully. But God, in all of these interactions, it was about family matters. It was about the family that will grow out of Abraham, and what that family will become, and the land the family will inherit. Yet in each of these, there was no mention of Sarah. There was nothing saying, okay, remember to tell your wife, or that kind of thing. So we're going to, but let us read from the Bible first. Genesis 12, 6 to 9 and 13, and chapter 13, 14 to 18. So let's take 12, 6 to 9. Honey, do you want to say something now? Okay.
Genesis chapter 12, verse 6. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord, who had appeared to him.
Okay, before we proceed, look at this particular promise. To your offspring I'll give this land. Now, this is a promise to Abraham. Abraham didn't have a child at this time. He had a wife who was married to Sarai. Logically, you would think that this is anything about his offspring. It's really about him and his wife. We will continue. Let's continue to verse 8.
Verse 8. From there he went on towards the hill east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued towards the Negev. The Lord said to Genesis chapter 13 now, verse 14. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, look around from where you are to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. Verse 16. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, verse 17, go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So Abraham went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tent. There he built an altar to the Lord.
Well, okay. The next interaction is God speaking to Abraham. This was after Lot had left, and then this was in a vision. He told Abraham that a child from his body will be his heir, that his descendants will be innumerable. And then he told him further that this big nation that will be his descendants, in fact, several nations, this one nation, nations will come from you.
Yeah.
So these nations that will be his descendants will at some stage in their development live in a foreign land for 400 years, and then will return to Canaan after that to settle in the land that he has given. In all of this, again, this was a vision to Abraham, God talking to Abraham in a vision. There was no mention of his wife, there was no mention of Sarah, but God was talking of a child from his body. Well, there is really only one way that a child can come from a man's body. So the point I'm trying to get to here is that what the promise he made to Abraham, the promise, all of the conversations about Abraham's future were about family. So why was Sarah not involved? Well, I think what is happening was that, yes, God considered Abraham to be representing that family, but it is more important. It's not just like somebody representing an organization, but it is that this promise to him was really a promise to him and his wife. That his wife was part and parcel of it. So much part of it that it wasn't necessary to mention, to say, okay, make sure you tell your wife about this or something, but that whatever Abraham had applied to him as much as it applied to his wife. Mm-hmm. Because God considered Abraham and Sarah to be one and not the same person, but to be united. And remember the way it was described in the creation in the interaction of Adam and Eve, that a man will leave his household, his fathers and his parents, and join with a woman to become his wife, and that two of them will become one flesh. So it is that two in one that we are seeing being played out here. That God was talking to Abraham as representing Abraham and Sarah. And whatever promise he made to Abraham, he also made to Sarah. Another thing we will find as we go along is that he also allowed them flexibility. I mean, they are humans. Of course, he could say, okay, here is a promise for you. It is for you and Sarah, and bring Sarah. I want to talk to two of you together. But he wanted them to work out details in their life, how they will walk towards the fulfillment of this promise. Just like so, whenever God makes a promise to us, he gives us flexibility to implement, to work towards implementation. It gives us a choice. And in fact, somewhere along the way, several years later, a challenge did come up in which Abraham and Sarah showed the strength of their bond. They showed the strength, they showed the fact that it is the two of them and anything else is foreign. Anything else is another person. So that is part of that is a choice they made, and that was part of exercising that flexibility that God allowed them when He spoke these promises to Abraham. This is the covenant, the beginning of the covenant. Later on, we'll see more about the covenant, but let us read about it in Genesis chapter 13, verses 1 through 5, and 13 through 16 and 18.
Genesis chapter 15, verse 1. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. The word of the Lord came to him, This man will not be your heir, but a son, who is your own flesh and blood, will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So shall your offspring be. Then the Lord said to 15 verse 13. Then the Lord said to him, Know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. Verse 16. In the fourth generation your descendants will come back here. On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, To your descendants I give this land, from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river the Euphrates.
Okay. So what we see in this is that it's mostly interaction between God and Abraham, in which God presented to Abraham a promise about his descendants, about himself and his descendants. A promise that we see as a promise to Abraham and Sarah. But in speaking this promise to Abraham, what we understand that God saw Abraham as the representative of the family, but also saw Abraham and Sarah as one, so that when he interacted with Abraham, that he was in fact interacting with Sarah. This is the first session in a series of 4 sessions on this, and we're going to see more some of the interactions and maybe understand more how the interactions between Abraham and Sarah, Abraham and God, God and Sarah, what we learn from there in relation to how God considers the relationship between husband and wife. Honey, I know this is a short one, difficult, but whatever. Let's hear what you.
Yeah, it's always interesting to be able to, in this kind of relationship, to tease out what the interaction between the man and the wife, what we can learn from it. So far, we have not heard Sarah say anything to, in this part. We are
Yeah.
not, it's just God talking with Abraham,
Yes.
with Abraham.
Yes.
But one important thing we will know, or what I get from this is, like you said, Abraham is the head of the family. He's the leader. But not just that he's the leader, he's the one that God called
Yes.
to give him the mission.
Yes.
And what I see here, what we can see from the interaction between Abraham and Sarah, I noticed that at no point did Sarah say to Abraham, "Where are we going to?" Because Abraham didn't even know where he was going to. God just said, "Leave everything and go to the place that I will show you."
Yeah.
Most women as spouses, will say, "So where are we going to? I should just fold my bag and follow you." You have to let us discuss this. Let us, So sometimes we have to. So it showed me that Sarah and Abraham, Sarah considered, and as a matter of fact, called Abraham Lord. So whatever Abraham said, it was like it was law. Not a law that if you break there will be penalty, but Sarah took it as such. And there was trust, and there is like, the two have become one.
Yes.
So there's no question. Sarah never questioned Abraham's authority, because we didn't see where he said, "So where are we going to?" The Bible did not give us any account of that. And then Sarah, not just that she didn't question the authority, they were like one. Speaking to one was speaking to the other. So, and this is something that is very important in a relationship, husband-wife relationship. God considers them one. And if you look at, events in the Bible, really, there's hardly a place that we'll see that God called the husband and the wife and sat them down and said, "This is what you will do." Even in the Garden of Eden, I think it's Adam that he gave the instructions.
Yes. Yes.
And if you look through, the person that God calls is always the person that he gives the instruction. Yes. Look at even when Christ was conceived. Yes, he sent the angel to Mary. But that was just the only time that we saw that God dealt directly with Mary.
Yeah.
After he sent an angel to convince Joseph, who is the leader of the family, that this thing happening to Mary is of God.
Yeah.
It's not like she's wayward or she did something behind your back. Thereafter, once he became convinced and accepted that challenge and that his role, every other communication was with him.
Yes.
When they should depart, where they should go, it was to him, and Mary just followed. So, what am I trying to say? Trust and believing in one's husband is, very important, because God puts husbands as representative of himself in a family. God put husbands as representatives of God in that family, as the head of that family.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean that everything that God does, he will communicate. Sometimes he comes through the wife and says, "This body will prepare the heart of the man,"
which we have seen.
Yeah, but this particular Sarah's attitude and her behavior of absolute trust in her husband and not questioning her husband, even when she didn't know where they were going to, and she didn't feel insecure despite her not having a child, and she just went with him. So it's something that we can pick from here, that as much as possible, it's not every time we challenge decisions that come from our spouses. And as wives, when we don't understand it, I always say you go back to God.
Yes.
And ask, because he's the one that gave the instruction.
Yes. Abraham trusted God Because God said, get up and go to a place I will show you. He didn't know
He
where.
didn't know where he was
There's
going.
no explanation of what the place will look like, except God said you will be blessed. And the whole world will be blessed through you. Then Sarah trusted Abraham exactly the same way. I'm sure Abraham explained to him here is interaction I had with God. But there was no question asked. She just went with him. And I think this is a trust that they built up over so many years of staying together. And as we go through this series, we'll find a situation where their relationship, maybe one or two situations where a challenge came in, and the way both of them reacted showed that their union was more important to them than anything else, and that they were going to stay together and go through their life together, and whatever came out of it, they trusted God, they were going to take it. So I think it was in that spirit that Sarah just stayed with Abraham. Say, okay, you want us to leave? Okay, let's go. Well, we believe that we're going to learn more from this series. Today was just an introduction to it. But we thank you for being with us. Thank you for paying attention to our Bible studies. We would like you to be reminded that every Bible study we've done in the past and all the ones we'll do in the future is available through our website at bankingblessing.org, bankingblessing.org. And there you will find different tools available to search and find something that we have done in the past. It's already growing into a rich collection, and we really thank God for giving us the opportunity to put this together. We will do more every other week, and we thank you for joining us. And what you learn from our website, from our Bible study program, make a positive impact on your life and bring you closer to God's purpose for your life. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless.